This is not an urban legend. This is what happens when the last light goes out. It's when the locks slide shut and you realize you're not meant to be left alone. We're bringing you 4 terrifying true school nightmares. If you think the classroom is the safest place, you are dead wrong. We all assume school is safe, but the oldest buildings harbor the darkest secrets. Were you truly alone when you heard that strange sound? Was it just an echo? Or was the building actively trapping you inside? In this video, we examine 4 true, documented, and terrifying stories from students who stepped into places they weren't meant to return, from Stay With Us until the end, and discover that nightmares sometimes hide right behind the classroom door. Story 1. The Locked Annex. They say the scariest moments are the ones you can't prove, the ones that make you question your own sanity. This is a true story submitted by Alex from Kansas, and it took place at Northwood High School. The annex was the oldest part of the school, built back in the 1920s. It was mostly locked now. Only the yearbook staff used it, and only until midnight. That night, everyone had left. I was the last one there, trying to finish the final layouts before the deadline. But that deadline wasn't the only thing the clock was counting down to. I realized I had left my house keys on the desk. No big deal, just a quick walk to the other end of the building. But the silence that night was different. It didn't feel empty. It felt held. That's when I heard it. A small, muffled thump from inside the janitor's closet. It was supposed to be permanently sealed after a plumbing incident. Years ago, I told myself it was the old pipes settling. It had to be the pipes. I grabbed my keys and turned to leave. That's when the whisper caught me. It wasn't in the room. It was right behind my shoulder. Like someone standing just inches away, saying something completely meaningless, yet utterly terrifying. I ran. I didn't look back. But as I hurried past the lockers, the fluorescent lights behind me started dying. Not flickering, dying one by one. They plunged the hallway into pure darkness. I felt like I was being chased by the dark itself. I reached the main exit door, the one I knew was always unlocked during school hours, but the latch was jammed. I was trapped. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I picked up, but the line was dead. Then I heard it. Coming from the receiver was a scream, loud, ragged, and absolutely chilling. It wasn't a girl in distress. It was the sound of a girl enjoying the terror. The scream stopped. In its place, a heavy thud echoed from the hallway. Whatever was back there wasn't whispering anymore. It was moving. And it was coming for me, fast. My only chance was the emergency stairwell. I slammed the stairwell door shut and desperately held the rusty handle. Whatever was outside was hitting the steel with impossible force. I could hear it groaning, scratching against the metal. A desperate sound of furious rage. I just kept holding that door, knowing if I let go, I was done. Then, silence. Total, crushing silence. I slowly took my hand off the door, and that's when I heard the distinct click of the outside latch being unlocked. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was being invited. I didn't wait. I didn't look. I just ran until I hit the main doors and burst out into the night. I never went back into the annex after sunset. And the next morning, the janitor's closet door was slightly ajar. We never found out what was in that closet. We never found out who was screaming. And that, I believe, is the real horror. The fear of what you almost saw. Story 2. The Night Shift Locker. The gym locker room. It's supposed to be about sweat, teamwork, and victory. But for me, it became about silence, dread, and a lock that just wouldn't stay closed. This is a true story submitted by Damon. This whole thing happened during my summer break when I took a night watch job at my old high school's athletics center. My work was straightforward. Check the equipment, clean the coach's office, and most importantly, lock everything down at 2 a.m. sharp. The hardest part was the boys' locker room. After midnight, it always looked huge, cold, and utterly wrong. The shift was generally uneventful, until I noticed locker 113. It was slightly ajar. I checked the lock, and sure enough, it was broken. So I grabbed a replacement from the supply room and secured it tightly. I locked the main door and was halfway down the hall when I heard it. A sharp clack echoing from inside the locker room. I went back. The lock was lying on the floor, and locker 113 was wide open. I put another lock on, this time a heavier, stronger one, and I made sure I heard the definitive sound of it clicking shut. This exact thing repeated every night for a week. Every single night, locker 113 was found open. I started taking photos for proof. Then, on Friday night, when I was securing the third lock, I heard something else entirely. Not the sound of a break, but a scraping sound from inside the locker. It sounded like something desperate, struggling to breathe, or maybe trying to claw its way out by force. I panicked, yelled at the door, and then just ran. As I reached the main exit, I glanced back. I swear I saw a shadow move across the glass window of the locker room door. A shadow that moved too fast to possibly be human. At 3:15 a.m., shaking all over, I got home. I was ready to quit the job. I fell asleep instantly, but a few minutes later, my phone woke me up. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message contained only one thing: a photograph. The photo was black and white, blurry. It was a close-up shot of locker 113, and next to it, lying on the floor, was the broken lock I had put on that night. But that wasn't the worst part. The message had been sent precisely at 3:17 a.m., just 2 minutes after I got home. As I stared, completely stunned by the photo, I heard a quiet, distinct squeak from my back door. I slowly walked toward the back door, holding my breath. I opened it carefully. The backyard was empty. But then I looked down at the door frame. Someone had scratched a symbol into the old wood, a circle with intersecting lines, the exact symbol I had seen on locker 113. I quit the job immediately. I changed my number. But I still have the phone with the photo of locker 113. And that symbol is still carved into my door at home. That thing didn't stay at the school. It followed me. Story 3. The Forgotten Observation Deck. Time is supposed to be linear, reliable. But in the oldest part of the high school library, I found a place where time didn't just stop. It began to twist. This is a true story submitted by Mary, who was struggling to finish her major final paper at a large old high school. She was desperate for silence, and in a building that had been expanded a dozen times, Mary found the one quiet corner. The observation deck on the 6th floor of the library. It was a forgotten study carrel space that overlooked the sports fields. They said the room was sealed off because of structural issues, but there was always a way in. The deck was perfect. Just one long table, 4 small carols, and absolute silence, except for the faint smell of old coffee and a chill that never seemed to leave the room. The first strange thing I noticed wasn't a sound. It was the clock. There was an old, filthy analog clock on the wall, completely disconnected. Its hands were stuck on 3:15. I ignored it. I was there to work. But every time I looked up, after an hour or two of intense concentration, the time on that broken clock had changed. Sometimes 3:17, sometimes 3:12. It wasn't stuck. It was drifting. One night, I was completely absorbed in my class project. The exhaustion was setting in. That's when I heard a faint sound, the rubber drag of an eraser on paper. It was coming from the carrel directly across from me. I was the only person up there. I stood up. The sound stopped instantly. The carrel was empty. I told myself it was the building settling. I sat back down. But then I saw it. There was a fresh note written directly on the margin of my notes, in my own handwriting, but with a different shade of blue ink. The note read, "I need more time." I snatched my notes. I needed to get out. As I rushed past the old clock, I saw the hands spin wildly, not forward, but backward, jumping from 3:15 to 3:00, and then back to 3:15. I fled down the stairs. But the emergency stairwell became a loop. I kept passing the same locked utility door. I wasn't running out. I was running in place. The ticking noise in my head, the clock, was deafening. It felt like time was stretching, trying to pull me back to the moment where I should have been studying harder. I don't know how long I was trapped. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. But suddenly the exit door appeared and I ran out of the building. I never went back to that school library, but the terror didn't stop at the school gates. Days later, back in my apartment, I found the note I had written in the observation deck. I need more time. I never wrote that note. I only read it. The real horror is knowing that the anxiety of that room still has me on its schedule. Story 4. The Basement Curiosity. The school basement was a legend, a whispered rumor passed down among the upperclassmen. They said it was sealed off because a fire back in '88 burned important records. But I knew the truth, though scarier was simpler. They had sealed something down there to keep it from coming up. This is a true story submitted by Liam, and it took place in the forbidden basement of my old high school. I've always been curious. Not out of bravery, but out of a sort of obsessive need to find the blind spots. The basement at Northwood High was the ultimate blind spot. In all my years, no student had ever gotten inside. All the entrances were bricked up with concrete, except for one severely weathered, rusted metal door hidden behind the boiler room near the athletic annex. This was the same stone building where the old locker rooms were, and I suspect the same hidden forces were at work. After weeks of planning and checking the janitor's shift schedule, I finally succeeded. One Tuesday night around 10:30 p.m., I managed to loosen the rusted bolts on the metal door. I had a heavy-duty flashlight, my phone camera ready, and my heart pounding insanely against my ribs as I finally pulled the door toward me. The metallic screech echoed so sharply in the night's silence, I felt like the whole town must have woken up. The door eventually groaned open. The air that hit my face was cold, heavy, and thick with a strange odor, a mixture of old dirt, oxidized metal, and something sickly sweet like failing sap. The darkness inside was absolute. so dark that the beam of my flashlight, instead of illuminating the space, seemed to be actively swallowed by the blackness. My first step landed on a piece of rotten wood. The path was littered with debris, shattered benches, dusty plaster casts from the art class, and dangling wires. Every single step I took echoed and multiplied through the long stone basement corridors. I tried to breathe shallowly. This space was even bigger than I had imagined. The corridors weren't interconnected. They were a labyrinth of concrete tunnels and chambers, each one opening into another unknown void. I kept walking until I reached the section I assumed was the old archives. But what I saw defied the stories of burnt files. Here, there were hundreds of rows of metal drawers, all identical, covered in a thick layer of dust and without any name or label. They weren't archives, they were storage vaults. I was navigating these endless rows of drawers when I finally heard a sound. It was very faint, coming from deep within the basement. A sound like something heavy and yielding being slowly dragged across the concrete floor. At first, I thought it was a piece of metal scraping, but it had a rhythm. A slow, deliberate scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. My heart was beating so loud I was certain the source of the noise could hear it. My curiosity, or perhaps my stupidity, forced me to move toward the sound instead of running. I turned off my flashlight and hid behind a stack of drawers, trying to listen. In the complete silence, the dragging was clearer. It seemed to be coming from a narrow hallway I hadn't seen before, blocked off by a thick, dark plastic sheet. I turned my flashlight back on and carefully approached the sheeting. The strange smell I had noticed initially was sickeningly strong here. I was now certain it smelled like old, cold blood mixed with dust. With a quick, sharp motion, I pulled the plastic sheet aside. The hallway behind it was short, ending abruptly in a small concrete room. A room entirely devoid of any objects, save for one single old wooden chair, positioned right in the center. The chair was facing the bare wall. And that was the most horrifying detail. Who or what places a chair like that in a sealed room? In the room's silence, I could hear my own breathing. It was rapid now. When I reached the chair, I realized why it was facing the wall. On the concrete, right about where a seated person's shoulder would rest, were multiple sets of deep scratch marks. These weren't shallow fingernail scratches. They were wide gashes, as if something with rough, blunt edges had been dragged across the concrete over and over in desperation. These weren't the marks of escape. They were the marks of submission. Just as I turned to flee, the real terror began. Behind me, the loud metallic clang of a lock slamming shut froze me solid. The metal entrance door I had used had been violently slammed, and the heavy bolt slid into place. From the outside, I was trapped. My body started to tremble. My phone, which was ready to record, beeped faintly right then and went black. Its battery was dead. I was completely alone, in absolute darkness, and I was now its prisoner. The dragging sound from the main corridor started again, but this time it was closer, and it was accompanied by a new element: heavy, rhythmic knocks on the concrete wall. The knocking was coming from right outside the small room I was in. Thud. Pause. Thud. Pause. The knocks were too slow and too powerful to be human. It sounded like something immense and very slow was moving. I crawled into a corner of the room, behind the wooden chair. All night long, the knocking kept moving. It circled the corridor, moved closer, and then moved away again, as if the entity was mapping out the room from behind the thick concrete walls. This went on all night. Every time the knocking approached, I held my breath. This wasn't a pursuit, it was a slow, suffocating siege. Near dawn, when the darkness finally began to fade to gray, the sounds stopped. The silence returned, but it was heavier than before. I waited. I didn't dare move. Then, to my disbelief, I heard the horrifying metallic screech of the latch being unlocked from the outside. The basement door was open. I scrambled out fast without looking at anything. I used all my strength to climb through the debris. I slammed the metal door shut behind me and frantically tightened the screws with my shaking hands. As I hurried past the boiler room in the faint light of morning, my foot slipped on something damp and sticky. I looked down. The concrete floor right outside the basement door was coated with a thin, wet layer of rust-colored residue. It smelled metallic and cold, exactly like the old blood odor that had been so strong in the basement. I never went back down there. But still, sometimes when I walk the main school hallways, I feel something clinging to my shoes. When I look, I find tiny bits of strange black matter with that metallic scent. That thing didn't stay in the basement, and I only barely made it through one night. The terror doesn't end in the school hallways. Next week, we're taking the fear somewhere else entirely. Prepare to hear true scary stories from remote places. These tales are from people who learned that in true isolation, no one can hear you scream.